This show is brought to you by PMP Nutrition and Supplements.com, your one-stop shop for fitness and supplements to get you to your best life. The Jacksonville Free Press, providing quality urban news for more than 30 years. And Edward Waters College, preserving history, promising futures. From the campus of Edward Waters College, it's the Rahman Experience. The Rahman Experience.
It's a brand new experience, a brand new time, a brand new way to do it. Hey, yeah, it's all mine. I'm the one telling stories you thought couldn't be told. I'm the one that bring you in your when you shaking from the cold. I'm the one always out front, yeah, trying something new. I'm the one that's gonna deliver when they ask what it do. Politics, entertainment, and science, all the news. Keeping you on the level with the stuff you can use. DJ Kids on the beat, the Rock's got the track. It's the Rahman Experience. You know that's where it's at.
Welcome to this edition of the Rahman Experience. What's going on? It has been a crazy news week. I almost want to do the entire show about news because there's been so much going on around the country and around the world for that matter with news. But I'm glad you guys joined me. This is a great episode. And this episode is going to be about an author, Abrahm Turner, who's the author of My So-Called Life It's My Turn to Speak, will join us talking about how he came to write the book, what it's about, and how you can get a copy of the book. So don't forget to tell people about the Rahman Experience. It's always a great show, I think. We're about 5 episodes in, but I wanted to do some housekeeping. So first and foremost, glad you joined me for this show, and glad we could get Abrahm Turner to join us in studio to find out about his book. Now, I want to make sure that you're following the show. The good thing is we are available on Spreaker, which is our main platform. We've also been picked up by iTunes and Spotify thanks to thousands of you listening and passing the word about the experience to your friends. And I can't tell you that I'm more delighted every time I tune in or look at the stats and see how many people are sharing the show and talking about the show. It really makes me proud, and I'm excited to have been able to bring this platform to people to have a voice. So thank you so much for the emails, the tweets, the Instagram messages, all of those things. And as the show grows, I hope you'll grow with me by giving me feedback, letting me know what you think about the show, how you want the show to evolve and develop. And you may remember on one of our last shows, we had all about CBD. We talked about CBD with Akeem Washington. Well, we have a promo code. Yeah, Team Rahman, promo code for CBD. So if you found that of interest, we can still talk about it on our social media sites. But all you have to do is go to nogravcbd.com. That's NOGRAVCBD.com and put in promo code Rahman, RAHMAN, and you can get specials and discounts on your CBD products. And we're also happy to have them as a sponsor of the Rahman Experience. So thanks, NoGrav, and thank you for being a part of that. Now, your feedback is always appreciated. Remember, you can call into our phone lines 540-RAHMAN-7. That's 540-RAHMAN-7. That's our phone line. Call in, let us know what things you want. Keep your message to about 30 to 45 seconds, and your message just may make it on the air. Additionally, you can follow us on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. On Facebook and Instagram, it's at RahmanJ, at RAHMANJ. And on, if you look over on the other side on Facebook, it is Rahman J Fans. Quite simple. All you got to do is log on, let me know what you're thinking, and I'd love to talk to you. Now, I kind of want to go into some of the stuff that's happening, but right now I'm going to talk about some of the things that I like right now. And one of the podcasts that I'm in love with, there's a great podcast out right now, and I plan to do this as a segment of each of the shows that I am going to be doing in the future. Kind of things I like. And one of the things I like, especially podcast-wise, there's a special on about the Atlanta child murders. And I thought it was so good, this podcast special about the Atlanta child murders. So if you get a chance, tune in to that show. It's really good. And I'm learning a lot. You know, the Atlanta child murders really affected my life because during that time, you know, parents all over the South and all over the country really weren't letting their kids go outside. And I was one of those kids. So I'll hopefully get the producers of that podcast on because I'd really like to talk to them and why they chose to now really go in depth and talk more about what happened then. Cool. So just a little bit about some of the stuff I like, and hopefully I'll get a chance to know your thoughts and what you like. So stay with us. Abrahm Turner is coming up shortly. But first, the news. In the news right now, a president, a porn star, a Playboy centerfold, and a reality show contestant. Now, it sounds like the setup for a new political thriller, but it's what's really happening in the administration of President Donald Trump. This week in Washington, all eyes are on the White House, and the president is eerily silent. No press statements, no Twitter, nothing. The silence comes on the heels of a primetime interview of Karen McDougal, a Playboy centerfold, who alleges a nearly year-long affair with the president.
He would call me, I would call him, vice versa.
So you had his phone number?
I have many of his phone numbers, yes.
Stormy Daniels, who allegedly spanked the president with a magazine.
You are special. You remind me of my daughter.
And former Apprentice contestant Summer Zervos.
I stood up, and he came to me and started kissing me open-mouthed as he was pulling me towards him.
Now, there are legal challenges going on about the statements that all women have made coming from all sides.
They all want to be in the White House. So many people want to come in. I have a choice of anybody. I could take any position in the White House, and I'll have a choice of the 10 top people having to do with that position. Everybody wants to be there. And they love this White House because we have energy like rarely before.
Speaking of legal teams, it seems like the president is looking for lawyers. That's right, U.S. President Donald Trump doesn't really have a legal team in place, as many of his top legal advisors have resigned. Now, the president says, as you heard in that soundbite just moments ago, that people are clamoring to work with him in the White House. On the world stage, China and North Korea had a sit-down ahead of U.S. bilateral talks with the small country that's under heavy UN sanctions. There was an unannounced private armored train that rolled into China this week, and the Chinese government is now confirming that Korean leader Kim Jong-un was on board and met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, there have been very few details released about the trip, but it's not the latest power play, as the White House is trying to force Asia as a whole to work with them to decrease the U.S. trade deficit. In TV news, Roseanne is back, and more than 18 million people tuned in to see one of the most beloved middle-class families of the 80s and 90s. The series Roseanne comes back with comedian Roseanne Barr, and it's the highest-rated comedy special or show on any network in 4 years. In fact, the show, like its predecessor, features the working-class Connor family. Now, in this iteration of the show, the Connor family are Trump supporters, while Roseanne's sister is a staunch supporter of Hillary Clinton. Now, are you one of the 18 million people that watched the show on the first episode, and will you be watching? As for me, gotta put in a little commentary, I was never a fan of the Roseanne show to begin with, so this is going to be interesting, but network executives are betting that the kind of conversation that we're having in our homes about politics is something that they want to see on TV. We'll see how it goes. We'll be right back. Mondays are just like one of those days.
Back to work already?
Now, Pie 5 Pizza Company gives you Magic Monday. Just stop in and mention Magic Monday, and for a limited time only, for just $5.55. That's right, $5.55. Get your custom handcrafted pie just the way you like it. The toppings you want, more than 40. Your favorite crust. We've got 4, including gluten-free. And your pick of savory sauces. It's all for just $5.55 at participating locations only. Fun, fresh, fast, and sprinkled with a little bit of magic. It's Pie 5. It's the Rahman Experience.
Abrahm Turner was born in Mount Pleasant, Texas, and he has been just an amazing guy with an amazing story. And years ago, he wrote a book called My So-Called Life, It's My Turn to Speak, and he did it in 2002. Recently, he came back with a reworked version as just an amazing author and writer and a corporate executive, and now college lecturer. Please welcome to the Rahman Experience my dear friend, Abrahm Turner. Abrahm, welcome.
Yes, hi. How are you?
Absolutely wonderful, man. Thank you so much for joining the experience, and glad to have you here. So tell me, who is Abrahm Turner?
So the short and sweet of Abrahm Turner is really this, you gave such a wonderful introduction. So, but it's a guy from Mount Pleasant, Texas, country boy. Basically, I grew up with great parents, taught me a very strong work ethic. And that's pretty much it. Just I enjoy life. I enjoy volunteering. I enjoy giving back and being part of my community in any way possible.
which is something that you've always done. And it's funny, when I met you going on over 10 years ago now.
Yes.
I was a corporate executive in Dallas. You were an executive for one of the companies we did business with in Dallas. And on the side, now this is the anomaly. You corporate executive, MBA, other degrees, worked for several corporations, but you had a lawn company.
I did.
Like doing people's lawns. Where did that come from?
Oh, well, it's funny you mentioned that. I always tell this story about to anyone getting started in business. I just had a dream. I was sitting in my office one day, and it was, I guess, flashed before in my mind, and it was like, go get a lawnmower and go get a weed eater. And literally, I left the office that day and went and bought both those two pieces of equipment. Had no idea what I was doing, and thus started my business.
I mean, and College Students Lawn Service was, which you employed people. And one of the things, because I asked you about it, I'm like, dude, you got an MBA. You should be running the business side of it. And one of the things I remember you telling me was, hey, I enjoy being in nature. I enjoy finishing a lawn and seeing a job well done.
Yes. I mean, it was the immediate kind of satisfaction, gratification aspects to cutting grass that made it worthwhile. And so, everyone is like, hey, you have this advanced degree. Why are you out here in the sun, in the dirt? And
right.
and I couldn't even explain it. I tell people now, it's like, I just love to play in the dirt. I mean, I don't know if that was just from growing up in rural East Texas and, red clay dirt days, but it became a passion. It didn't start out that way. I didn't know that I would love cutting grass, but I learned to love it, and it became such a part of who I am and such a part of my own fabric.
Well, tell me about Mount Pleasant. So you said you grew up, I've been throughout East Texas. Mount Pleasant is a very small community. What was childhood growing up like for you?
Childhood was pretty standard, very neighborhood. We had a really good neighborhood. So I knew all of my neighbors. I knew, everyone on both sides, and everyone knew my family. And so it was, it was a smaller community, but everybody certainly had each other's back. I never felt like even though I was in a small town, that I was a stranger. I'll just say that.
So everyone was, and from looking at East Texas, it was a community. You're an artist, you're a unique person. I mean, did you fit in as a kid, or did you have to find your own way? You were one of two brothers coming up. How was that fitting in with the people around you?
So interestingly enough, I think as, you don't know what you don't know as a kid. And my parents encouraged me to explore. So I was always inquisitive. One of my earlier nicknames was George from the book Curious George. So my uncles used to call me George, like, hey, what's going on, George? Because I was always researching something, looking for, some type of something. I mean, I read a lot of books. I read encyclopedias. I wanted to know about stuff. And so as a way to keep me engaged, because I think my parents realized that I took summer school classes from the time I was in the second grade. I had art class. I was part of an art school. And so I think they encouraged me to explore all the various aspects of who I was without saying, hey, Abe is going to go off and write a book or do whatever. So they just say, hey, figure it out.
What kind of student were you? Were you studious? Did you make good grades? Were you a so-so student?
Oh, no.
What was academic?
I was an honor student. So for me, I took pride. That was one of the things I could hang my hat on. So I was a straight A student for the most of my education, even to the point of graduating a year early from high school. So I completely skipped the 11th grade. So I was a freshman, sophomore, senior. So I always, prided myself in being well studied, well versed, and I wanted that to be an achievement of mine.
So you went to college where?
So my college story was varied, but I initially started college at 16 at Penn State University.
What took you to going from, because in college you did some creative writing but you weren't quite into writing the novel thing just yet. what took you there? What made you want to say once you got to college that even though I'm here and I'm working on a business degree, I want to write?
Initially, what I was saying as far as my college being kind of a twisting path is when I initially went to college, I did not stay but for a semester. I had to come back home and really work. And so during that process of rebuilding and I remember talking to my uncle, and he was saying, because I was beating myself up about not being able to finish college. And he said, sometimes life hands you some detours. It's okay to go on a detour. And I held true to that. So before I got back in school at 22 or 21, I had actually penned the very first version of My So-Called Life. It's my turn to speak. I still have it. It was written on loose leaf paper and pencil, and it became part of the soundtrack to my life because for me it was my therapy. Writing became my therapy before I could afford a therapist.
which especially as people of color is something that if we have issues to work through, the first thing they say is go to church.
Yes. And that's true. I mean,
this was your catharsis. Yeah.
It's very true. I mean, however, what you realize is that you can let so much out. Like, even though you might go to church and yes, you know your church family, but writing becomes a way where you could actually, for me, it became an art where I could totally be my 100% authentic self. So I had no one to judge me by my writing or what I said or how I said it. So it was a good thing. It was like I said, it was my way through.
You said you had already penned the story. So tell me about Chris Coldwell.
So Chris Coldwell, much akin to my own story, was in a very small town situation. So he was struggling with a lot of varying things in his life, struggling with family dynamics changing, shifting constantly throughout the story, and really trying to find out who he was. Much of this story is about him starting the journey towards self-discovery.
There's a lot of Abrahm Turner in Chris Coldwell's life.
Of course, the best stories are always laced with a little bit of truth.
And what was the most, and before we get really deep into My So-Called Life, at that time in your life, what was one of the lessons that you can remember back that was very key to helping you to find that space where you could write and could get in that place to find the catharsis? What was one of those lessons?
So I remember sitting down to write this, write the book. I mean, I didn't know it was going to be a book. I just knew that I had a story. I needed to put it out, get it out of my soul. I remember talking to a couple of writers back then, and they said, hey, regardless of whatever happens with this, write every day. And I wrote every day for 6 months straight. And this wasn't toward a book. It was just to get it out, yes, just to write. Exactly. Just to get it out. And then when I looked back after writing 6 months straight, I realized I had something like, oh my God, this could all be a book. I could really make this a thing. And so that starts the journey towards it becoming my first book.
And the first book you published yourself with kind of like a chapbook, right?
Yes. So I did. I published it myself. I never forget. I went and went to Kinko's, FedEx Kinko's, and had them printed up. And I still have the originals on floppy disk, so that may date me a little bit. But I mean, it was that kind of day. But I managed to keep the original receipts because it was such a milestone accomplishment for me. Regardless of whether I did anything with the book beyond that moment, it was an accomplishment that I could sit down and say, hey, I actually completed a story.
Because here's a kid from East Texas and, no one in your family had written a book. So here was somebody that was able to show I transcended where I was in that moment.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. How beautiful is that? All right. So you were a little brother coming up.
Yes.
And now you're an uncle and we'll talk about that. But how did you feel like the baby of the family? Were you, clearly you were Curious George, but were you, did you find yourself fighting the role of the baby, or how was it coming up with you being this little brother that was trying to find his way?
So I was a little brother, but in a lot of ways, I held my own from the time that I was young. So it was, there were opportunities where I went out to discover, my own path. I never really followed the beaten path of my brother or my older brother. I was very much so curious about my own things. So I wanted to initially, I had this idea I was going to be an astronaut, and so I read all these space books. I never forget it.
Wait a minute. I've never heard you say this. You wanted to be an astronaut?
I did. I wanted to be an astronaut.
And what prompted that? Because you remember, you and I aren't that far different in ages.
Right.
So you remember Challenger.
Yes, I remember Challenger. I read a lot of books by Isaac Asimov. As a kid, I had a library card, to our public library, and I read books all summer long about constellations, about stars, about you name it. And that was initially my first childhood dream, was to become an astronaut.
What changed besides the fact that you'd probably have to spend 10 years in school getting a PhD?
Life. Life. It's simply put, life. Life changes your trajectory and your path. Definitely studying it taught me something, and then I was able to add to. So building up on that, I knew that by the time I got to college, I went to Penn State on a biology course. So I was going to be a geneticist. And so I got accepted to their biology / pre-med program at Penn State. And that was going to be my life's path. As I said, coming back after a semester and then working, by the time I got back in, of course, that was no longer my passion. I didn't like science that much, turns out. So I ended up down the path of business.
Or at least that kind of science, because truly being more into botany, really, like you love doing the earth. So just a different kind of science.
That's correct. Like horticulture, definitely landscape and turf, agribusiness, all those things.
Because I remember I tried my darndest to talk you out of going back to get a horticulture degree. I was like, why? You have an MBA. You remember that conversation?
I do remember that conversation.
And you were looking, I think I was either about to go to grad school or in grad school. I'm not sure, but you were like, yeah, I'm going to go get an advanced degree in horticulture.
Right.
I'm like, dude, it's planting grass. Like,
but even still, that
not to minimize horticulture and botany.
That taught me something more. It took my business, my landscaping company, up a notch, because I learned so much about the science of actually cutting grass. There's a science, there's growing seasons and growing bands and types of flowers and what grows here and what types of nutrients or macro and micronutrients that you need for various plants. So I was able to directly feed that into my business and actually take my business up a whole nother notch.
Did you use the Farmer's Almanac? Do you remember the Almanac? Did you use that for planting and all that stuff?
I did not use the Almanac. In fact, what I did is I understood what regions we were in and what growing band we were in. And I knew from just based upon seasonality when turf would actually be growing and when it would go dormant. If you're in Dallas, pretty much your turf will grow from about the second to third week in February up until October 31st. Usually it's that after October 31st, that first week of November is when turf itself becomes dormant.
And see, if I had, although the only thing I think I have a green thumb in for me is orchids. I love orchids. I can take care of them, but yeah, and I can cut the grass when I need to, but people were in line literally to have you taking care of their lawn.
They were, and very upset when I stopped cutting grass.
Extremely. It was crazy to me.
I didn't know what I didn't know about cutting grass, but when I tell you that first year was the greatest learning experience, how not to cut grass, my first year I gave away so many free cuts. It was ridiculous. I was like, I got to do better.
Why were you giving away free cuts?
Because I just didn't know how to cut grass. People think cutting grass is just, gas and lawnmower, cut it on and go for what you know. No, there's actually, to make your grass look create curb appeal. That's what you really are going for, not just to cut the grass.
So you're, I guess, an earth artist, stylist, something. I guess I remember Nancy Wilson once saying, she's like, no, I'm not a singer. I'm a song stylist. So I guess you're an earth stylist.
Or what I would say, the lawn whisperer.
There it is. There it is. I got to ask before we get back to the book, you've worked for some of the largest corporations on the planet.
Yes.
You were at DHL for a time. You were at the Coca-Cola Company, which is where I met you. What has it been like for you to go especially as an African-American man from a small town in Texas that was probably unexpected for you to do something like that? How did you get into some of the biggest companies in the world? And when you answer that, as you think about it, what would you tell a young person now who is maybe in your shoes or who is where you were back then? What would you tell them to propel them to get to that point?
I would tell them simply that no is never the end of the story. Is that the story oftentimes begins just on the other side of that no. So I heard a lot of no's, but I kept pushing and I kept trying and I kept asking for the raise and I kept asking for the promotion and I kept asking for the extra work and I kept delivering time and time again on my commitments. And so therefore it became, again, it was part of the story. It was part of my career path. I know when I stopped for the period of time I stopped writing, I focused solely on my career. So that was during my DHL days where I did travel quite a bit. And so just honing my skills in business before having a college education, before having any of the things, because I had many of my positions just, before even finishing school. So I layered school, I mixed school in afterwards, of course, but that was never how I got those roles.
The largest companies in the world, and you were holding pretty key positions. And I guess you're saying just doing the work and being available.
Doing the work, being available, and being okay to do things that stretch you and are outside your norm. I say that from the aspect of when I came on with DHL, I was actually a temporary staff person. So I had, I knew a little bit about computers, but by no means was I a database analyst. But, I came in and I said, you know what, I can learn how to be a database analyst. There are enough books out there. So reading. So I picked up books and I taught myself how to create access databases and how to work within Front Page and those types of softwares. I actually read those books and was self-taught. And so when those positions came available where I could get a promotion or I could, petition for those roles, I had the experience already there.
Plus you were in-house, which made it easier.
Yes, it did. It made it easier. So there was we were doing a quality program at DHL. And of course I was still temporary. I was a temp. And, of course, nobody who was full-time wanted to take on the project. So I raised my hand. I said, hey, I can do it. I had no idea what I was doing. I will admittedly say that until I picked up a book. I learned, I went online, I started researching what I needed to do. And what ended up happening, which became the backdrop to my career, like kind of that launch pad almost, was that the facility ended up getting awarded 3 worldwide best practices. And so that opened the door for the other roles. That opened the door for them to now invest in me to become an auditor and do those types of things, which later, they open the door for Coca-Cola and for those other companies. So I say to anyone is that, again, just because you don't have it right now does not mean that you will never have it. Sometimes it takes you to prepare for that next opportunity. You start by reading and you start by educating yourself, with whether you have the college education or not, but there's a wealth of resources out there. The internet is widely available. So take advantage of it.
You've lived, besides Mount Pleasant, in Dallas, in Houston, in Atlanta. What are some of the other places? I think you were in Miami for a time too.
Not
right?
in Miami. I went back and forth to Miami. So I would say I was probably, I spent a about almost 2 years back and forth bi-coastal. So I was actually, during my time at DHL, the offices were there in Miramar, Florida. And then also I did Dade as well as San Jose, California.
What was your favorite?
The Bay Area was always my favorite.
It's something about San Francisco. I know we hung out there one time, and my favorite spot in San Francisco was Sausalito.
Love Sausalito.
Just on the other side of the bridge. Yeah, it's like just amazing. So, why was that your favorite area?
It was my favorite area, I think, because I didn't feel like anyone, like I felt like I blended in, like I mixed in with everybody. I didn't stand out. I wasn't the black kid from East Texas. I was just a Bay Area person. So if that makes sense, I was able to blend in.
And because you know what, there's so many transplants in the Bay Area.
Yes.
Right. So you just got to be a part of things.
And mixing in and being so young, and because I started traveling out there when I was 22, I believe, 21, 22. And so being in the mix and the throes of all those things and having that opportunity for those experiences.
And Atlanta, that didn't rank on your list of favorite places?
Atlanta, so interestingly enough, I never considered Atlanta as a living space for me until I lived there. It took some time. I always say that after year one, Atlanta grew on me. It was never a place that I said, oh, well, yes, I got to live there. In fact, I was like, no, I don't want to live there because everybody else wants to live there. Again, I'm kind of like to go my own way and have my own path. So if everybody likes to do it, I probably won't like to do it.
I don't know. Atlanta's just, and I'm sure with the traffic and of course, Coca-Cola being headquartered there, all eyes are, on you there, but you made it. You went to Atlanta and made it your own.
I did, and it was good. It was a good experience. I'm glad that I took the opportunity to leave Dallas, which was my comfort zone, and leave when I was, kind of on top of things in Dallas. So it was very much so a good time for my exodus. So I could, it's oftentimes people overstay their welcome. So I had literally grown up in Dallas. And so it was definitely time for me to make that transition.
All right, back to the book. We have with us Abrahm Turner. Abrahm Turner's amazing work, My So-Called Life, It's My Turn to Speak. You can get it right now on Amazon or wherever you buy books. Let's take a look at this quick passage. In an effort to hide his shortcomings, Dad suddenly stopped going to Kingdom Hall. He insisted that Tyson and I continue instead, but we no longer had to go. And as for Tyson, he never really liked going, so this was right up his alley. We stopped going altogether about January of 1991. Living in a house where there is a problem between your parents and you're left in the dark is not a great feeling. Tyson knew more about the problem than I did because all I heard were the arguments. Tyson had heard it from all of his friends. I did not want to see the issues that plagued my households. So again, I turned to school for escape. So was school really an escapism for you as it was for Chris?
Yes, very much so. I think school became as I said earlier, it was something I could hold my hat on. It was something that I could be proud of. It was something that became my identity. So school was always the opportunity. Reading books was always the escapism, the way to get out of what was going on around me.
Through all of those experiences, and obviously you put it in the book, but and the writing is so vivid, but through all of the experiences that you had at that point where you were deciding to leave Texas, were there, because there here as you read Chris, there seems like even though he knew who he was, there seemed to be some doubt. Did you personally have doubts as well as you were beginning to trek off in new places and do new things?
Gosh, yes. Doubts, of course, because you don't know what the big scary world is going to deliver you, especially going out there and not having anyone to say, hey, that's a safe place to go to, or that's an unsafe place to go to. So you're just kind of taking a chance. So I remember getting on a plane shortly after, for the second time, shortly after September 11th, and, traveling for work every week on a plane, off a plane. And, there was a time where, you just don't know. And of course, my family they were all very scared for me. They were like, "Oh my gosh, you're always gone. Just be safe, and call us if you need us or whatnot." So again, it's just one of those things where you're always unsure of what's next or what's behind the next door. You just got, but you have to walk through it eventually.
Will Smith once said, "The place where you find success is just on the other side of fear."
I agree.
And I thought a more poignant thing had never been said. I thought Will Smith was really right on that. So you're an uncle. How's that?
Being an uncle is awesome. Actually, very awesome. I have a wonderful niece, couple, and great nephews, and it's an awesome experience to see them grow up and see them develop and become their own people.
And to be there to mentor in that process.
Yes.
And they can get to go back home when you finish the mentoring process.
They can come off my payroll.
Yeah. Is fatherhood in the picture for you?
I don't know. I've been thinking about it. I don't know. You never know. If I look back on my path, nothing that I've done today was something that I sat down and said, this is what's going to be in my plan. Because everything that I planned to do didn't necessarily go as planned. So I don't know.
And it doesn't have to be the way. I was looking at an article. Hill Harper, he had his first kid. He adopted a newborn baby, and Hill was like, he's a single dad, and the baby's newborn, and Hill was like, I think 50 or something, and he's adjusting to fatherhood quite well at 50.
I think it's whatever the timing is, it'll be great. It'll work. Everything will work out the way it's supposed to work out. Just say that. And
I guess my realization too has been, if I don't, then I'm good. Then I'm still good. I can still pour some of this, whatever I got, into some kid somewhere.
That is correct. I know that I'm toying with the idea, because the moment that I decide to have a child or adopt a child, I'm pretty much inviting my mother to come and live with me. So I love my mom dearly. I love her dearly, but I don't know I'm ready to have her in my household just yet.
Oh, please. Your mom's a sweetheart. I'm sure that
she is, but I know when she comes to visit, it's the mothering, it's like, oh, the dinner's cooked. Oh, the laundry is washed. It's like, I'm independent. I got it, Mom. I do. I promise I do.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Free labor. Okay, let me stop. My mom might hear this. So, and speaking of your mom kind of struck out on something new and different.
Yes, she did.
Right?
So I'm so proud of her making this leap. I would say leap of faith, leap of just unimaginable, moving from Texas to Alaska. So she did that about 5 years ago, and she loves it.
Has it been that long already?
It's been 5 years. Actually 6 years.
And
Jeez.
How's she coping with 7 seconds of daylight in the winter?
I think she's adjusting just fine. I know that she loves it there. I knew that it was serious when she decided to sell her home in Dallas, and so I was like, "Hey," she's like, "Do you and your brother want this home?" I said, "No, not at all, Mom. Live your best life." So if living your best life is living in Alaska, go for it. Now, I'm not coming to visit in the winter. I mean, I'm a summertime visitor. My brother goes on the winter. He's a winter shift, so that's where he goes when he goes.
And you've been a couple times since she's been there. Yeah. How have you enjoyed it so far? Like when you go, are you Team Alaska?
It's great when I go, but again, I go when it's warmer out. I have yet to go in a winter. And I said I don't even think I have the right clothes for it. I mean, especially not now living here in Houston, but like no coats. You'd have to have like a real like Alaska type coat. Like, I don't even know what that looks like.
I would just put throws and blankets upon blankets on, because they say it is bone chilling. I've never been to Alaska.
It was funny. I was talking to my mom yesterday, and so she said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to get out and enjoy some of this weather. It's a balmy 28 degrees." I said, "Oh, well, isn't that great?"
Here in Florida, it became, and I travel quite frequently, and so other places, and it's so interesting to me. Here in Florida, it went down to about 22 during the winter. Literally, schools
Oh, wow.
closed. The city shut down, no trash collection. There was like literally a flurry. Like it wasn't even a full snow, it was a flurry, and they called a snow day and shut the city down.
That sounds about right.
Like a flurry that didn't stick.
Well, but you know,
right?
that's the South in general. I say the same way for Dallas. When there any bit of ice or snow or anything happens, the city will shut down for sure.
I'd rather people be safe than sorry, so I stick with that. Now you're currently in Houston. Talk to me about the hurricane that affected the area so bad last year. I know you're a huge volunteer. You're always working in the community. How did that affect you? I think you were stuck for a little bit. And what did you do afterward to help the recovery?
So, yes, I was stuck for a little bit. I actually could not get out of my neighborhood. So, but I didn't suffer any flooding in my home. So I was actually fine. But getting out, just kind of coordinating rescue efforts. So I did a lot of calling. I did a lot of the walkie-talkie app. I forget, it's called Zello. That we were using to communicate and send boats out. And so I was, constantly, luckily I had access to internet and Facebook and those types of things. So as people were posting and saying, hey, this person needs to be evacuated, I know I was able to arrange for one of my coworkers. Her dad was in a home that was filling up with water. And so, getting her dad out, helping her get her dad out, coordinating that effort and being there for everyone. And then shortly after the water started to recede, I went and volunteered with the Red Cross. So as they were taking in some of the evacuees from various parts of Houston, I was there helping sort through clothing, accept goods and those types of things.
And this was one of the weirdest things I think I've seen. One of my former bosses when I was a news anchor is she works for, I think it's KHOU
Yes.
there in Houston. And literally it was like a real-time camera in the newsroom. Their newsroom filled up with water.
Oh, yes.
It was... that's not something you think you'd ever see is a working newsroom in one of the top markets in the country, and the newsroom is just filling up with water. It was almost unreal.
It was unreal to me because, again, everyone's like, well, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you go somewhere? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, I honestly didn't think it was going to be that bad. Like all the predictions, I had no idea. And we didn't even get the worst of it. We got the worst of the flooding, but we didn't get the worst of the damage from the storm itself. Because the storm stalled out over South Texas. So as it was just rotating around, it was like, okay, this thing's got to move. And so every time one of those bands came around, it was like dumping more and more water.
Which was the main issue. I had one of my grad school classmates, she lives in Beaumont, and she and her family literally had to chop through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
It was...
Beaumont got a lot of damage, and they unfortunately they didn't get as much coverage by the news as other areas, but Beaumont definitely was devastated by the storm.
Glad you were there to be, a volunteer for it. And that, speaking of volunteerism, I mean, that's something that has been in your DNA. Is that something that your family did? I mean, I know when I came to Dallas and I was looking to get involved in the community, and so I go to the Urban League or the United Way and try to find spaces. But when I met you, you already knew of the connections to go through, and a lot of people didn't. Where did that thirst to give back and be a volunteer, where did that come from?
Honestly, I don't know. I've thought about it, over the years, and I would say somewhere about turning 25. When I turned 25 is when I realized that I had been blessed significantly, coming from where I came from to where I had arrived at 25, and I was like, why not give back? Why not do something more? Leave your mark on this thing called life. And so I started this quest of giving back, being active in the community, as active as I could be, in a number of different ways. I mean, from being like student day or career day, or organizing scholarship drives and all kinds of stuff. So it just, wherever you can lend your talents, that's what I tell anybody. We all have gifts. We all have abilities. And our job, at least from my perspective, at this stage of my life, is for us to all give back, for us to all be that way for someone else.
There was a famous African-American woman philanthropist by the name of Eartha White. Her mom was Clara White, and there's a mission in my home city that still bears her mom's name. And she said something that's kind of applicable here. She said, do all the good you can for all the people you can while you can. That's our responsibility.
I agree 100%. Just do the best you can. Do the best. Give
Yeah.
to, I was always about giving, because I looked back over my life, and I've looked, constantly always looking back and saying thank you. And like, it's the attitude of gratitude, but I've never truly been without throughout this thing called life. Yeah, I've had some low points, as we all have, and we'll always have in life, but I've never truly been without. And I think, once you realize how blessed you are, and particularly if you ever leave the United States and you go into some of these third world countries and things like that, you really see how fortunate we truly are. And it gives you a greater sense of appreciation for this thing called life. And so you have this desire to give and to be part of your community and to uplift your community.
Now, speaking of leaving the United States, you literally a couple summers ago just decided, I'm going to leave and travel and backpack through Europe. It was crazy. Not even crazy. It was crazy in a good way, because, I'm game to do stuff like that. What prompted that decision, and what was that experience like for you with your first time?
So
And wait a minute, I got to correct. Not quite backpacking. Those are some of the nicest hotels in the world that you stayed in. So I don't want people to think that you were living in hostels and tents. No, you stayed really well.
I did not spare any expense. I'll just say it like that. But no, it was a good experience. It was definitely a changing, a transitioning point in my life. So changing careers, changing locations, because I was looking to, at that point, I was moving to Houston. And so I took this time and my resources that I had at my disposal at that moment, and I rediscovered myself. This was like what I would do my hashtag is, this was my eat, pray, love moment. This was me to truly let go of it all, refocus. And I remember coming back as I traveled through Europe, from London to Paris, to Marseille, France, to Barcelona, to Madrid, and so on and so forth, that I came back so clear. Because a lot of times I think in the States, we were constantly bombarded with negative news, a lot of negative news. And so I was so clear when I came back, and it was just like, okay, I'm good. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to hit the ground running. And
so clear was like, yes. You hit a reset button.
I did. I hit a reset button, and I encourage anyone, that, has the opportunity, if you have the opportunity to leave, go, even if it's for a little while. You don't necessarily have to go for a month like I did, but just go and see and embrace yourself, embrace the culture, but immerse yourself in that culture. And you'll see the beauty of life. I mean, see how similar we really are.
As the year continues, as we kind of wind up, you are working on a follow-up that's scheduled to come out later this year. Can you give me any details about what the follow-up to My So-Called Life is?
Yes, so it's a continuation towards self-discovery. Chris really plants his feet somewhat, and he goes through learning what it's like to be an adult in this world, and not only being an adult, but being a Black man. Because it is definitely written by a Black man, but it is about a African-American character. And so just some of the challenges and things that he's going to experience will be very much so related to being a minority male here in the United States.
Are there plans to do, obviously, Chris Coldwell is someone different outside of you. Do you have plans to maybe work on a first installation of a memoir or anything else past the continuation?
I'm going to weave in some stories. So I have a short story series that I had penned back in 2004. And so a lot of Chris's experiences will be weaving in and out of those characters' lives. So his story will take on a completely different feel. It will be a little more, how will I put this? It's going to be a lot more levity, especially in this particular book. I'll tell you that. As I'm writing it, I'm having fun with the characters now, because when I initially wrote My So-Called Life, I was in a different space. Again, like I said, this was my catharsis, so it won't be as heavy as My So-Called Life. I'll tell you that. I'm going to shift them around a lot.
Before we get out of here, I want to do a lightning question round, so just answer these quickly. Some of them may take a little time, but I like to get some behind-the-scenes stuff, and then I want to get your final thoughts, what you'd leave with us. And again, you can contact Abrahm Turner, who's the author of My So-Called Life. Again, it's My Turn to Speak, at abramwrites.com. You can also follow him on Instagram and Twitter at abramwrites. All right. What's your favorite color?
Canary yellow.
Why?
It's happy. It's light. It's, it's the sun.
What's your favorite food?
Food, tacos.
Do you have any pets?
No pets. Not even a goldfish. No.
Do you like pets?
I like pets, but I'm definitely not the pet parent type.
What movie would be really, really good if it were made into a musical?
Memoirs of a Geisha.
Good one. Okay. If your 5-year-old self found itself inhabiting current day Abram's body, what would your 5-year-old self do first?
Go get some ice cream.
So you have a weakness for ice cream.
I love ice cream. Love it. I don't eat it often, but when I do, when I tell you, Ben and Jerry's, it can do no wrong in my book. They can do no wrong.
What's your favorite flavor of Ben and Jerry's?
Caramel Sutra.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm more of a Haagen-Dazs guy, if not one of those organic. I know, don't judge me, but that sea salt caramel organic thing. Yeah, I does that.
Well, interestingly enough, the best ice cream I've had to date was in Paris.
Duh, clearly. If animals could talk, which would be the rudest?
The rudest animal? Cats. Cats are just rude.
That side eye is real.
Yes, it's rude.
If the cat side eyes you, you know you have been side eyed.
Yes.
All right, what's something that everybody looks stupid doing?
Oh, gosh. Trying to work out for the first time.
Speaking of working out, you started a fitness journey. I think we were, I trained you for a bit and we worked out together a lot. And I looked around and next thing I knew, you would pass me by. So how's fitness going for? I know you lost, 30, 40 pounds during that time?
It was actually 75 during that time.
Was it that much?
Yeah, it was 75. But it's still growing. It's still going. I'm not going as much as I used to, just with life commitments. But it's definitely still part of my experience.
Well, fitness is something that I think, as you know, it becomes a lifestyle, and you still maintain it. So you look great. Life's good for you, man. Any final thoughts? Any lessons you want to leave with the people that are listening that you want to share that really sums up who Abe is and why they should read My So-Called Life? It's my turn to speak.
I'll say it like this: is when I initially wrote the book, I remember I still have emails from folks that read it back then, and it's a powerful story. It's a story about a young man. It's a story about some of his challenges, and in many ways, Chris is part of everyone's experience. You have all types of experiences, all kinds of things that will occur throughout this thing called life. But if you can rise to the occasion and you can push through it, eventually you will come out on the other side. And so that's part of this whole journey with Chris. So as you start this journey, walking this journey with him, toward the end, you'll see him taking another step. And so as we transition into the next book, you'll be able to see how he takes the lessons that he's learned in this book and he applies them into the next book, into the book after that.
Oh, man, I'm so excited for all your success, continued amazing work. I know you'll be touring the country soon and with the new book. So we look forward to it. Again, thank you so much for stopping by the Rahman Experience. This is Abrahm Turner. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
The Rahman Experience continues in just moments. We'll be right back.
Donna from Louisiana. the storm just hit, and we went from donating to the food bank to needing it.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Tonight in Your Best Life, I look back at a vintage Your Best Life from those times when I anchored the news about 5 years ago. And the story still reigns supreme. Now, Oprah Winfrey was the featured speaker at Harvard University's graduation ceremony. Tonight in Your Best Life, she has a thing or two to say about successful people she has interviewed.
I've done over 35,000 interviews in my career. And as soon as that camera shuts off, everyone always turns to me and inevitably in their own way asks this question: was that okay? Friends and family, yours, enemies, strangers, in every argument, in every encounter, every exchange, I will tell you, they all want to know one thing: was that okay? Did you hear me? Do you see me? Did what I say mean anything to you? Profound. The main takeaway from that lesson was that people want to know that they matter. From presidents to entertainers, people all ask the same question: do you hear me? Do you see me? Do I matter? So take a moment and do something special for those in your life. Just let them know that they matter. Sometimes all it takes is a simple thank you. Now, letting the others know that they matter, that's another key to living your best life. And even years later, those words remain something that's a constant. People want to know, do you see me? Do you hear me? Does what I have to say really matter? And Oprah put that into her speech, and it's something that I took from it. And I hope that in some ways, even 5 years ago and when Oprah gave the speech, that everybody listened to it and that we listened to each other. But at the end of the day, everybody's voice, just listening to it, is important because they all have their reasons and rationale. And I think when we listen to each other and then love each other and find ways to show and share that love, once we have that communication, we can move forward. That's why I'm a journalist and an actor and a professor. I'm a storyteller. And by telling these stories, we do better in our lives. We do better in our interaction with other people. And we can really change the scope and the focus of where we are. And that's what we do so often. We look, instead of changing that focus, we look and say, well, me. I want. Instead of sharing our beliefs and then listening to what other people are saying. It's an important way of living and an important way of life. If only we can embrace it, we can then empower ourselves to do better and be better in everything, every situation that we encounter and what we do. So I'm glad that I had a news director who was cool enough and had the foresight enough to allow me to have those moments on Bounce News, so that at the end of every newscast that I wouldn't just sit there and talk about murder, death, kill, and all of the bad things that happen to us, but to tell stories about what we can learn from every situation and occurrence that we experience in our daily lives. That's one thing I think we would benefit more from in Washington, with Democrats and Republicans in the House versus the Senate, and this we like and this we don't like. Instead of coming in with our mind made up, just take the time to listen. And that's why I love this podcast. And that's why I love telling stories, because when we can listen to one another, we can make informed decisions and make changes. Now, remember, the conversation continues. You can log on to Twitter at RahmanJ, Facebook at RahmanJFans, so facebook.com/RahmanJFans, or on Instagram at RahmanJ. But I want to know what you're thinking and feeling. And remember, follow the show. Quite often I leave little tidbits during the week. So if you're not following, you won't know. All right. Thanks for tuning in to yet another version or episode of The Rahman Experience. I look forward to seeing you next week. And if no one's told you, I love you. Now make the rest of the day absolutely amazing.
The Rahman Experience. It's a brand new experience, a brand new time, a brand new way to do it. And yeah, it's all mine. I'm the one telling stories you thought couldn't be told. I'm the one that bring you in when you shaking from the cold. I'm the one always out front, yeah, trying something new. I'm the one that's gonna deliver when they ask what it do. Politics, entertainment, and science, all the news. Keeping you on the level with the stuff you can use. DJ Kids on the beat, the Rock's got the track. It's the Rahman Experience. You know that's where it's at. Rahman Experience.